So it's time to mess with my $50 pair of doors. The other one is good. This one's got some rust issues and a rust hole. None of this stuff concerns me too bad because it doesn't have to be like perfect. Wonder how, this just comes off. Oh, that makes it much easier. This is a rubber plastic kind of thing. So it's still 6:30 in the morning, so I'm not going to start power tools, but I'll sand this area down, get back to good metal. I have some fiberglass cloth and some epoxy, and we'll just put a layer or a strip, probably 2 strips along here, and everything will be lovely. But it's too early to make noise. It's 6:30. Try not to sand until 7 or 7:15 for the sake of the neighbors.
So I needed to do some epoxy work down at the bottom of the door, but I did not want to get epoxy in the grooves that this little threshold thing snaps into. So covered it with blue tape, which the epoxy kind of sticks to, but not too badly. And I put it back in place. So while I was doing this filling work, the little threshold thing was in place, but it was protected with the blue tape.
Now I can fill this area here with the thickened epoxy, and it won't go into my groove that I need. I'll be able to pull this off later and set it with just regular caulk, and then I'll put 2 layers of glass over the top, and we'll have a repaired door. Well, I still got to fix the 2 bottom corners, but that'll be separate. Be a separate deal.
I kind of feel like I'm back working on boats again, but to do this little patch repaired job, first I painted with neat epoxy to maximize the gluiness of epoxy, the stickiness, and to make sure, you want to get a good bond. You want everything to stick together. And then I mixed some polyfiber with the epoxy to get it thicker so that I could fill these cavities and it wouldn't sag. I want the no sag property of thickened epoxy. And then while it was all still sticky, I wet it again with, this is a new batch of epoxy without thickener, painted it on there, and then I had 3 strips of, I think this was 6-ounce woven cloth, and I just put them on there 1 layer at a time and tried to get some good wet out. So this is a patch job. It's a good patch job. It's a strong patch job, but I'm going to be asking a lot of these doors. They're going to be on this wall with, in the beginning, no overhang, exposed to the weather. So time will tell how they hold up. I think my patch will hold up, but they may start rusting in other places. But we will get an overhang on the mini house as soon as we get it set and protect these doors from weather, because it's a lot to ask of even a brand new door. If you put it in a exterior wall with no overhang, it's a pretty tough place for a door to live.
So I believe what's going on in here is there's a board at the bottom of the door, and this is end grain, and it got wet and it started to rot because of the same thing's happening on the other end. So I'm going to kind of seal it up a little bit with some epoxy best I can, and then I'm going to glue this block in there a little below the surface, and then when that cures, I'll finish it off with some thickened epoxy, and it might last my lifetime. Okay, so when that cures, that'll give me something to sand down too. Not even sure why I'm worried about doing this, but I'm gonna put some Total Fair on here, kind of make it look a little nicer for what that's worth. Just an old door. Why it's important to have patience when you're doing carpentry work. So I bought this pair of doors and they only had half the hinges on them, which was cool. I actually found 2 hinges, so I went to Home Depot and bought 4 more hinges, thinking I would just take them apart and put the pin, swap the pins. But the pins don't fit, they're not the same size. So fine, we take the hinges off. And of course the bolt pattern, the hole pattern doesn't match the Home Depot hinges with what was in the door. So you drill and tap and use these self-tapping screws, no big deal. And now I go to take off the other 2 hinges and this screw is stuck. I mean, stuck bad. I guess I can just, I'm gonna trash this hinge so I could cut it in half with my grinder. Okay, forward moving, everything takes longer than it should.
Here we're changing a Phillips screw head into a slotted screw head to see if that won't help get it out.
That's all it needed. There's a little heat. Okay. I'll put this hinge on here and the big fat hinge on the, no, let's put the fat hinge on the top. It's got the biggest load, and the little hinge on the bottom.
So the skin of this door, the outside surface, is super thin. I guess it's the way they make them. But there's a thickener behind where the hinges were. So 3 of the new screws will hit that thickened area, so they'll be plenty strong. And the 4th one just really doesn't do much except plug the hole. So marked them, center punched them, drill them out a little bit. Even though I have self-drilling, self-tapping screws, they just seem to work better if you pre-drill a little hole in the middle. And I like to wobble the drill around a little bit and make the hole bigger. So I start out with a smaller bit than normal and wobble it around. And this is totally not true. I just have shaky hands. But anyway, got the hinges on, the self-drilling screws did the trick, and they're strong, strong, strong. So I know from experience that these particular self-drilling, self-tapping screws will break, they'll snap off. So making an effort here to not over torque them, just kind of take it easy and get them in there a little bit at a time. And it worked, I got them all in and none of them broke.
Okay, hinges are on. I did the first door. I used these self-drilling, self-tapping screws, but they got a little bit of a pan head. I was hoping it wouldn't matter, but it did. It interferes with the hinge closing all the way. So, kind of got myself in a bind over there. When I'm doing this door, I found out by drilling an 11/64 hole, a new hole, next to where the old hole, drilling a new hole next to where some of the old holes are. The original hinge screws are self-tapping. See, they got that little cut on them, and it seems to be working pretty good. I wish I would have done this for the first door, but maybe I'll just take those screws out and grind the heads flat a little bit.
So this is the start of the time and labor intensive process of milling my rough cut cypress down into usable material so I can make the door jambs. I know I'm lucky to have all this stuff, but it's hard to appreciate how much time and effort it takes to get a flat usable board out of the very rough, very in thickness material that I have. Everything takes a while, but I've got that because I am retired.
Okay, so I got one side good and one side pretty good, so that's all we need to do. I need to rip them 3 inches wide, cut them to length, and then cut a notch for the door. But I'll cut them to length first. So that's my top. It's 3 inches wide. And these are my two sides. I'm gonna rip them 3 inches wide. And then I have to cut the groove for the door. I'm gonna cut a notch for the door out of the side jamb, well, top jamb too. The door is 1 3/4, so I'm allowing a little bit more. I have a habit in the past of trying to cut it too tight, and then by the time you put paint and stuff on there, you got it bound in, and then you have to redo it. So 1 3/4 and a 1/16. I'm gonna take out a 1/2 inch, and that's where the door is gonna fit. So I got the door jamb sitting in place. The door's just sitting on it. Got the hinges pulled up out the way. And I have 11/16 at the bottom of the door. It's kind of tight, but I think this is enough to put down some of that cheap laminate flooring and then still have some sort of little threshold over the top of it. It's just a whisper of wood. So I just need to mark the hinges and turn it over and chisel out a spot for them. And then put this door to the side and do the other door, and then put them both side by side to measure the top. Yeah, I gotta cut this. I gotta cut this back, so this will be flush. So the top piece will butt into here. Yeah, it won't be bad. This stuff's pretty easy to chisel too.
I've got 4 hinges one size and 2 hinges another size, a little bigger. And I could have set up a router with a jig, but I think it's just as quick and just to cut them with a hammer and a chisel, and it doesn't make as much noise. So the hinges are complete on both doors, and little things, everything's working copacetic. I put 1 screw in each hinge
and I cut them off where they poke through just to make it easier to get the frame in the right spot without fighting that screw. And when I get it correctly, I'll put the other 3 screws will be long and they'll go into the framing. So I got the 2 doors fitting, I think, like they need to fit. So if I measure between here and here, that should be the length of the top frame. And I'm gonna screw it in there, and I'm gonna take the 2 doors off and just go hang the frame with all with screws so I can loosen it and adjust it. Back in the day, we'd have kept the 2 doors here, we'd have put some temporary fastenings to hold them tight, and we'd have put the whole kit and caboodle in the hole. Both doors, the frame and the trim, and then shot the trim with a nail gun. But gravity's stronger than it used to be. I can't pick this stuff up. So I'm gonna just hang the frame with screws, hang 1 door at a time, and I can adjust the screws or even replace the screws. And when I get everything the way I want it, I'll put the outside trim on, and I think I'm gonna screw it also to make this super strong. Top of the frame is in place. Everything's lovely, I believe. I got a spreader at the bottom to get the width right. So I'm gonna take the header off, take the spreader off. I'm gonna take the 2 sides unhinged from the pins and go put this back together out in the little camper and stand it up and put a few screws through the hinges into the wall as level as I can get them, and then we'll hang the doors back up and see what happens. Door number 1 is fitting pretty good. Just have 2 screws in the jamb, and the header looks pretty straight, which means the jamb is probably vertical. I will need to put get this bow out of here and put a few more spacers, a few more screws, but I'm gonna, let's hang the other door and see what happens. Boys and girls, it doesn't get much easier than that. Everything fit pretty good. Still got some fine tuning to do on the shims. I need to cut some thin wedges, but this door works perfectly. This door needs to come together at the bottom, which just means loosening the hinge screws and shimming it a little bit. And I'm super stoked because that went well. Nothing's twisted. Everything's in good shape. But I don't have a doorknob, so I need to put something on here to keep the wind from slamming this thing around. So this is the start of my threshold. Big board. I ripped it to the right length. It's a couple inches longer than I need. And I also ripped the drops where it was longer. And I will practice on these little pieces. I got one here, one there. I may even cut that one in half. And I'll do my practice cuts on here to make sure I don't booger up my good piece. And I'm gonna start cutting on it. Try to get the shape I want. So this is gonna be my threshold. It's gonna slope, about like that much. So then this part on the top needs to be cut flat so the door can close over it. So will be a flat cut up here, and I'll go down about 3/4 and make another flat cut. And then I'll go down and out and down so that this part sticking out is gonna be nice and beefy. The part under the door is not gonna be a whole lot to it. So let's make some practice cuts and see what we can do. Okay, first 2 cuts, 5-degree slope. So it goes from basically the part that goes under the door, and it's gonna be flat. So I need to drop straight down at a 5-degree to remove this chunk so we can drop down. And then I'm gonna have to remove a little chunk for this little step. Let's get this chunk off and see what it looks like. So now it's starting to look like something. I need to remove another little chunk right here so that this flat part can sit flat on the plywood. And that should be 5/8 deep, and I have the width marked. So let's go cut that. Okay, we're getting pretty close. I think I might go 6. No, I'm gonna keep the degrees the same. I cut this little notch too deep. I measured 5/8 from the bottom. I should have measured down 5/8 from the top, but I'm good with this. I'm gonna cut the long one just like this. So I cut the full long threshold and took a little sliver off the end of it and put it here. And it looks like, obviously I got to go down with this notch a little bit, but I think the whole thing's too high. So I'm gonna cut another cut here, which means I'm gonna have to go down with the notch a good bit, but that's okay. It's coming along. This door is a little higher off the deck than this door for some reason. So right now this will go under this door, but it won't go under the other door. So I'm gonna cut maybe a half a saw blade off the bottom of the long part and then adjust the notch so that it can sit down flat. But yeah, we're getting there. It's looking good. Made another cut another coupon, made one more adjustment, cut one more coupon, and now I got it just where I want it. So I got it now. Everything's copacetic. So I'm using the final coupon to mark the jam here. I'm gonna cut this and this so I can be able to slide the threshold in from the outside. It may be a little thick underneath the door, but I can plane that by hand. It's okay. Okay, we still have some sanding and painting and caulking to do. I'm calling these doors done as far as building. The threshold is not screwed down because I'm going to take it off and paint it inside and out and all the bottom and everything when I paint the rest of these frames. But we have a good fit. This is a fixed door, and it closes snug, and this is the operable door, and it closes snug. So time to move on to the dreaded windows. They're going to be a little more complicated, I'm afraid. Never seen this before. There's no screws in the latch, and there's no screws in either side of this deadbolt, and this inside trim doesn't unscrew. I don't know what's holding this thing together. I want to put my new locks on it. Mostly I want a doorknob so the wind won't slam it. But, I guess I get the grinder and just cut it in half. So I think the key to the puzzle was I needed the key to unscrew the cylinder, and I didn't have the key, so I used my electric key.